Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast. Today we're speaking to Adam Houlahan, who is a social media expert, and he's particularly good at helping businesses grow through the power of social media. He's the author of several books, the first of which is called Social Media Secret Sauce, and the second book, which is due out middle of the year, is called The LinkedIn Playbook. Adam is an international speaker, he owns several businesses, and he knows what it's like to walk the walk when it comes to running the day-to-day operations of a business. In this conversation, we're going to be covering a heap of ground, but we're going to be starting off with why dentists should really care about social media and what it can do to help grow a practice effectively. Adam and I are going to be discussing the common pitfalls that dentists come across when it comes to social media and how to avoid them, of course. And we're going to show you what social media can actually really do for you when it's done well and how to take social media into your practice really effectively without just adding it as another thing to the to-do list. So listen up. I hope you enjoy the episode, and without too much further ado, we'll crack on and get into it. Good morning, Adam. Welcome to the show. How are you travelling up there at the Gold Coast, mate?
G'day, Jesse. It's a beautiful day here, as it always is. Doing well. Great to be with you.
It's good to see you struggling through there at the Gold Coast, mate. I know you do it tough there, you know, with the beautiful beaches, the sun, the surf, the sand, you know. It must be a struggle.
Well, Jesse, it is, you know. It's one of those things you've got to decide, you know, just which beach you're going to go to today. These are things that the big decisions in life we have to make here every day.
Well, mate, I can think of no better person who's better equipped than you to do that, mate. That's fantastic. Thanks for coming on the show today. We're going to be covering a whole lot of stuff around social media, as you know, and this is, of course, your area of expertise. You're a social media strategist, and I know that you work with some big names when it comes to social media. But today we're going to be diving down into, you know, service-based businesses, dental practices in particular, and how to utilize social media in general. And I travel around talking to lots of dental practices and dental practice owners, as you know. And typically, you know, before we kind of get into, you know, the social media itself, most of the guys I speak to kind of go, you know, I just want to be a dentist. You know, why should I care about social media? Can't you just make sure I've got patients coming through the door? I'm wondering if you could just give us a bit of an overview of, you know, really why should we care about social media? And as you're going through that, I'm curious to tap into your backstory and how you kind of got into social media.
Yeah, sure, Jesse. Well, first of all, I'll say that thought process that your dental clients are going through, they're not alone. It's fairly common with a lot of service-based businesses, accountants, lawyers, doctors, you know, similar. But we will get into that. Just as a backstory, I was doing some consulting work for a company about 4 odd years ago now. They had a fairly large retail presence around the world, which was basically my background, and it was sort of going south on them, and they brought me in to have a look at, you know, whether we could turn that around. They had about 1,200 stores from memory around the world, stores that they supplied content to. And we were doing some research on why some businesses around the world in that space they were in were doing well and why others weren't, including these guys. And what it actually turned out to be was that the companies that were really doing well were just really good early adopters of social media. And at that point, I actually knew nothing about social media. I think I had a personal Facebook page like everyone, but that was about it. And so just this journey piqued my interest to look into social media and its application for business. That just sparked, you know, an interest in researching it more, and I very quickly came to the conclusion that social media was going to play a very intrinsic role in business going forward, and it was something I just personally needed to get on top of. And so I just dove into it head first, and I always said it was a passion. My wife said it was an obsession, and she's probably right.
Yeah.
But that's what started the journey, and I connected with some pretty influential social media people around the world at the time, and they were very gracious enough to even talk to me, and which a lot of them now are personal friends, and I've even spoken with some of them at conferences around the world and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's been a pretty fast journey from zero to where we are today.
Yeah, it's been a fast journey, you know, in that sense, but some of the results you've achieved along the way, mate, have been nothing short of phenomenal. And again, obviously you've shown that you've got a real passion for social media, an obsession, if you will. And I know you've written a book about it, Social Media Secret Sauce, which is a fabulous read. It's on my bookcase and it's something I refer to really regularly. But coming back to that point, that we just spoke about really at the beginning is that, most of the guys that we're listening to this podcast, their core business is not social media. Your core business is obviously social media. I have a very healthy interest in marketing and social media as a subset of that. But most people listening will be going, I just want to get on with my day-to-day business. I want to get on with the core stuff that I do. And from a dentist point of view, really what we want to see are full appointment books and a stream of patients that we can treat who are happy to come to the practice, pay their bills, stay around and hopefully refer their friends and family to us. What sort of role do you think social media would play in that? And I guess where I'm going with that is, how do we kind of overcome the overwhelm at the thought of social media going, it's just another thing I've got to do. How do we get through that? What's the ROI on it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you nailed two very, very important parts of the why, and there's probably a couple of extra ones I'd like to cover.
Yeah.
Probably one of them, like you just said, is, we just want customers that keep coming back. Social media is one of the most powerful way to retain customers. I'm sure one thing you would be teaching with your clients is that it's far easier to retain a customer than it is to get a new one. So if your competitors are very acting on social media, then they're out there looking to poach your clients in a number of ways, and having a strong social presence for your business is one way of retaining those existing clients. It's also exactly the best way to get referral partners. Referral partners can, of course, be your existing clients, but it can also be, other related businesses. In fact, we work with, as you know, a number of, lawyers and accountants and doctors and whatever with sort of very specific LinkedIn strategies. And while I'm generalizing, almost always those guys are the same as what a dentist would be using LinkedIn specifically around partnerships more so than getting new clients. So social media has a number of facets to it, more so than just marketing. The other thing is it's a very good way to maintain a handle on customer feedback and complaints.
Yeah.
Whilst someone may or may not specifically make a complaint while they're at the practice about something they're not happy about, they're very, very quick to jump on social media and blast you an hour or 2 hours later. It is a way to be able to maintain a direct line of communication on those things, and also to keep on top of what your competition is doing. So as far as an ROI, it is it's an interesting term in social media because the ROI is not necessarily always specifically I spent this many dollars and I got this many back.
Yeah,
it can be much more wider than that. I mean, that certainly at the end of the day is one of the most important KPIs that you're going to look at. But it can be also in how many customers you're retaining through that, how many referral partners you're developing through your social strategy, and just a lot more than dollars and cents sometimes.
Yeah. Look, that's fabulous, because one of the things that constantly that I get asked all the time is, Jess, if I spend $1 on this kind of marketing strategy, what sort of return am I going to get? And of course, the answer is not as simple as spend $1, get 2 back kind of thing. There are so many facets to that, and I love the way you've spoken about retention, which is a subject very near and dear to my heart, as you know. And I read some research saying that the cost of acquiring a customer is somewhere about 6 times greater than the cost of retaining one. So even just looking at that metric alone, that's a phenomenal return. It's a phenomenal reason to embrace social media and to be thinking it's got to fit as part of the overall marketing strategy for any business, but in this particular case, a dental practice. Typically, Adam, again, I know that there's going to be a lot of guys going, yep, that's great, I get that we need to do it, but how do I kind of fit that through into my day-to-day activities? I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I'm kind of doing dentistry, during working hours to make sure I'm, getting my billable hours up, so to speak. And then how do I kind of fit this into the mix? And then the other question that comes up is, this is something I get asked all the time is, isn't social media just kind of putting a few posts on Facebook? Is it, what really is social media, and how can I kind of fit it into my day-to-day life if I'm already fairly busy?
Great question. And as far as is it just a matter of posting on Facebook? Social media is so much more than just Facebook. I mean, okay, everybody's going to have some sort of presence there, no doubt. But there's over 400 different social media platforms.
Yep.
And now I'm not suggesting that you'd even want to go and have a look at all those 400. Many of them are industry-specific, country-specific, and that sort of thing. But the reality is it's just far bigger than just Facebook. The reality also is that you only probably need to be on 2 or 3, and you just need to do those 2 or 3 really well. I'll give you a great example that would be, I think, as relevant for dentists as it was for the company we sort of did this for recently. Mm-hmm. And we said, look, if you ever looked at Foursquare, Foursquare is not a social media platform that people think about in any depth. And as I said, in this particular practice that I was talking about was a physiotherapist. Mm-hmm. And I said, you can imagine, and they were here on the Gold Coast, so it was in an area where obviously a lot of out-of-town people. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, it'd take you an hour to set up a really strong presence on Foursquare, and then it's set, forget, leave it, you never have to touch it again. But there's times where people are out of town. I'm sure it happens all the time in dental practice where somebody's got a rocking toothache and need to get something done. People who are savvy with social media, the easiest way to find a practice of any sort when you're not in your local town is to jump on Foursquare, and it's going to tell you within a radius of exactly where you're standing, where a dentistry are. So you can get just a simple, number of clients just from just being present on something like that, where you don't even have to maintain it. It's just set it up, forget it. And this particular guy that we did this with, 3 months later, I was speaking to him, and he said, I've already got two people that have come to me exactly from Foursquare.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah, so I suppose that's what it really is. It comes down to the key thing to start with is obviously to be on the right platforms. Yeah, and that's the first thing that you really need to do is make sure that you're spending that time, because you don't want to be spending a lot of time. You want to be spending your time, being a dentist. That the time you do spend is on the right platforms, and it could also be that you're going to get some help along the way of lowering your time spent on it and outsourcing some of that. And there's a number of ways you can outsource.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I want to touch on outsourcing specifically in a little moment, using VAs and the like. But just coming back to the question of choosing the right platform, and of course, that is, pretty critical first step in terms of, making sure that you're getting those foundations right in the first place. When you're deciding what platforms to focus on, are there any particular criteria that you look at and going, well, which platform should I be focusing my time and effort and energy on? So for me, I'm often thinking a bit about where does my ideal patient hang out, or my ideal client, or, whatever language we use around that. What criteria do you use in terms of, thinking about platform?
It's a good question, because I'm imagining that people ask you that inevitable question, what is it that you do? And you say, I'm a dentist. It's about as descriptive as saying that I'm a lawyer. Yeah. I'm imagining that most of your clients potentially specialise in some area of dentistry. And to give an example, let's say that you specialised in working mainly with children. Well, then the platforms want a better description. If your ideal client are children, then your social media strategy would obviously, or it may not be obvious, but it would not be around attracting children. It would be around attracting the mums of those children. So as opposed to if you specialised in some other area of dentistry, the target market could be completely different. So 2 different dentists could have 2 completely different strategies, this is where it kind of does people's heads in. It's not as simple as coming along and saying, I'm a dentist, so which platform should I be on? Yeah, it's got to go deeper than that. So how we would do that is to deep dive into that particular business and who their ideal client is, and locations and all sorts of things to develop a very clear strategy, and then of course research what's going on in that space and come back and say, look, these are the 3 platforms we think you should be on. And it wouldn't be as simple as saying, look, it's all dentists are the same, and so you should be on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram or anything like that.
Yeah, look, I really love that actually, Adam, because there's a couple of conversations around that. And one of the things that I'm hearing you talk about, if I'm assuming correctly, is taking a strategic approach as opposed to just diving in and, putting a lot of effort and energy into a series of tactics, which, without the overarching strategy may ultimately prove to be a little fruitless if you don't get that kind of ground zero right. The other thing that you've really spoken to, again, which just makes my heart sing, is understanding your ideal patient, your ideal client, and equally what niche that you might be in. We tend to use the word specialist for registered specialists in dentistry, but many general dentists have a niche that they're of dentistry that they're very good at. And what I'm loving is that when it comes to choosing that platform, you can really look at your ideal patient, the niche that you're operating in, the location that you're based in, and start thinking strategically rather than tactically about how you're going to roll out a social media plan. So that's really great advice, mate. That's cool.
Pleasure.
So, mate, in terms of service businesses and dental practices in particular, or health-related businesses and others similar, what do you see as, apart from choosing the wrong platform, which we've already covered, what do you kind of see as the I guess the most common mistakes? Where do people go wrong? Where do they go off the path?
A common one across all industries, but there's probably three core things that cause that, as you said, apart from not having that strategy in place. And the first one is exactly that: is marketing to the wrong people.
Yeah.
And I'll just use that same scenario we used before of if your specialty was children, then your ideal client is the mum of those children. So you've got to make sure that you're marketing to the right person, and then of course on the right platforms. The other one is really not having a strong ascending transaction model or sales funnel, however you want to describe that that process. But a lot of people are of this mistaken belief that social media is just about whacking a banner ad up on Facebook and watching the phone ring off the back of that.
Yeah.
And it really isn't that. The reality is that the high majority of people that are using social media, and by this I'm referring to your potential clients, are actually using social media. Well, one, they're using it to be social, but when they're using it for looking for businesses and whatever, they're really not that often just clicking on ads and going, oh, that's the people I need to deal with.
Yeah,
they're using it to research. So you've got to connect with these people. You've got to take them through a journey that eventually ends in getting them to do something. And there's a research study done by Google a few years ago, and they coined it the zero moment of truth.
Yeah.
And essentially, I know you're aware of that. Essentially, it means that you basically have to have 7 hours or 11 touch points with people before you have built enough credibility with them to ask them to even do something as far as work with you or anything like that. So it's really around that, not having that ATM. And the last one is my pet hate is where people say, oh yeah, we're doing social media, our receptionist takes care of it.
Oh yes.
It's this mistaken belief that younger people are good at social media. Well, yes, they're great at wasting their time on and being social on social media, but that's a huge leap from that to basically having the keys of the kingdom of your business and what's being said and the voice of your business. So almost always that the receptionist or that young person that's in your business is really highly unlikely to be the right person to be driving that whole strategy.
Adam, I couldn't agree more with that, mate. I hear it a lot as well as, my 21-year-old receptionist or 21-year-old dental assistant or whoever it happens to be in the practice that is, suitably young enough tends to, run the social media marketing, which, as you say, is quite folly. And I think there'd be many a practice owner kind of, nodding along as we're talking here, because one of the common complaints I hear about from practice owners sometimes when they're dealing with their staff is managing their staff's use of social media for social purposes during work time, with smartphones and all the rest of it. So I agree that there's potential to waste a lot of time and potentially a lot of money to be wasted if you're handing over that responsibility to the wrong person. So again, getting the right people to work with you, to support you in your social media, I think is a critical thing to get right. And someone who understands that strategy and can work within that strategy and use the various tactics that support the strategy. So, mate, that's fantastic. In terms of we've spoken about the mistakes, and I guess the corollary of that is, when social media is done really, really elegantly, it's done well. You've obviously worked with a lot of businesses, you've observed a lot of businesses, and you've worked with a lot as well, where social media has been done really nicely. What are the common themes there, Adam? What sort of things do you see coming up time and again that people are doing well, that are getting good results? What do you think that they're nailing?
Yeah, good question. To start with, it'll depend on the strategy. So it depends on, are you looking for referral partners? Is it client retention? Is it, getting new clients? So the first thing is that you have to have something that's trackable and measurable.
Yeah.
You got to know, where am I now, and where am I going, and where did I get to? And all those objectives should be outlined in your initial strategy. But once you've got that core metrics in place, then social media done well. The term I like to use about it is it positions your business or yourself with preeminence, and it just means that you become, your business or you become highly credible, the go-to business or person in that industry, in that area. You're using the right platforms, and you're essentially, what you're doing is providing a lot of highly valuable content. Everything about social media is all around content. Content comes in many forms. Video is probably the fastest growing form of content. As you be aware, like Facebook Live is just exploding.
It's going nuts.
And it's highly obvious that Facebook want everyone to gravitate towards video content.
Yep.
At the moment, whilst Facebook are in that build mode of video, you can get a lot of traction through it. So you get a lot of visibility, whereas normally on Facebook you get almost zero for free.
Yeah.
It won't stay like that. Once they hit a critical mass, it'll become like everything else, where you're going to have to pay to play. So right now, if there was one thing that I could say to all of your guys, is embrace a little bit of video content. The thing that people really love and resonate to a large degree is to see the engine room of what you do.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be all about fluffy pictures and nice stuff. People are interested in the engine room of not necessarily of seeing someone getting a wisdom tooth pulled out or anything like that, but of just like seeing what your guys doing in the lunchroom, and lots of cool things about the normal everyday occurrences in your business. So social media done well gives life to your business is probably the way I'd want to describe it.
Yeah, cool. And look, you spoke a lot about content there, or you touched on content. I'd like to just explore that a little bit further, because obviously there's you've spoken about video and Facebook Live, and do you think that when you're thinking about audio content, obviously this podcast is audio content, which will be syndicating through our social media channels, but do you think that things like the traditional blog post is still carrying some currency? Is that still worthwhile, or do you think it's kind of video and audio and written, or do you think that it's a mix of which content kind of feels right for you? How do you guys work with that?
Look, I think it's definitely a mix of all of those. We tend to refer to Facebook and those things as the high value things, but audio is exploding as well, because we spend a lot of time commuting in traffic. I don't know about yourself, but if I'm traveling somewhere, I'm not really inclined to listen to the radio or whatever, I'll always put on a podcast. So it's because it's just a good use of that time. You can't be in your car and read a blog post. You can't be in your car or you shouldn't be in your car and watching something on Facebook or YouTube. No. So it's horses for courses, but I believe video content is very important. Audio is very important. Blogs are still important, albeit probably where they were the holy grail. They're sort of not as high now, but still you need a mix of a few different sort of types of content, but video and audio are certainly two really good ones for sure.
Yeah, cool. And just quickly, just on one specific form of content, which we kind of don't talk a lot about, do you have a view about infographics as a form of content?
I have a personal view on them, and I wouldn't say that, there's a lot of people that spruik the value of them. It just depends on, we all take in information in different ways.
Yeah.
Some people are visual. myself, I prefer written content.
Yep.
I tend to digest written content better than like infographics. I find infographics personally, and I want to really stress I'm talking about my personal experience here, not as a social media strategist.
Yeah.
I find them very confusing and hard to follow, and so personally I don't like them.
That's cool. I'm
prefacing that comment by saying that that's a personal one, not necessarily one that to say that infographics are not good. That they are, but they appeal to a limited market as far as the way different people digest information.
So again, it's just getting that mix, right? Yeah, getting that mix of all the different forms of content, and that's cool. So that's just going to form just another part of the mix. Hey, Adam, we spoke a little bit earlier. We touched on the concept of not having to do everything yourself. And again, this is the coming back to the challenge that many practice owners will be facing where, they're doing dentistry by day, trying to run their business by night and essentially having a full plate of stuff. And, we're just now saying, hey, you better put social media on that plate as well. And we spoke a bit about the concept of not having the reception people necessarily take on the role of some of your social media and posting bits and pieces and getting the languaging right and so on. How do you think dentists can kind of overcome the need to get some work done, not necessarily having the right staff within their current team to do that? What other resources are you thinking that dental practice owners could utilise to make sure their marketing and their social media in particular is done consistently and effectively?
For my business, same thing. I could spend and do spend all day working with clients and developing social media strategies and whatever. Where's the time to do the accounting?
Yeah.
Am I going to sit up at 9 o'clock at night and do that? Well, I could, but I don't. I outsource that to a bookkeeper.
Yep.
I can say, I need to take an hour or 2 hours out to clean the house because it needs to get done. But I'm not going to do that. I have a housekeeper that does that. So outsourcing your social media is a viable option, and it just depends on just how much you're going to embrace that. There's plenty of different ways. You can go to social media management companies. There's plenty of them around. You just want to make sure that you're partnering with the right ones. There's no different to most service-based industries. There are some cowboys, so you need to make sure that you partner with the right people. But you can also use VAs.
Yep.
There's a lot of really well-trained VAs that you can connect with directly or through VA management companies.
For anyone listening, VA is virtual assistant.
Yes, virtual assistants, which essentially means that these people are trained in a very specific field, and in this case, social media. If you were going to use VAs, though, Jesse, I'd say what you really need to do is still get that really professional strategy done.
Yep.
To start with, it's something that you should really, before you do anything, before you even decide, how you're going to implement, is get that real core strategy nailed down. It makes or breaks everything. To get it done properly, it's not a quick and cheap exercise.
No.
As an example, when we do strategy documents for new clients, it's about a 2-week process. There's probably 4 people on our team that would work on that.
Yep.
And it's roughly about a $3,000 investment to get that done right. What will come out of the back of that's a 50 to 70 page document with very clear critical drivers, your KPIs, the right platforms to be on, research behind what your competitors are doing, and a step-by-step, you need to be on these platforms, you've got to post at this time of the day, this is the type of content at this time of the day, these colours, it's really in-depth.
Yep.
So if you make the investment in that to start with, then you're miles ahead. But no matter how you implement it, at least you know what you're doing, and you know how you're going to track it, and you're going to be able to see what your ROI, as you said earlier, is. So do that before anything. Invest in that, if nothing else, and then go about. Okay, is it with a dedicated social media team? Is it with a VA that I connect with directly? Is it through a VA company that manages the VAs on my behalf? There's plenty of options. You can certainly outsource 90-odd% of it, there is a little bit of input you obviously need to be having. But yeah, no different to most of the other services you potentially are outsourcing without even thinking about it. It can be outsourced for sure.
Yeah, cool. And one of the things just to touch on with that as well, because one of the things I come across speaking to lots of dentists and I suppose business people in general, not just dentists, I have to say, is when it comes to marketing and they're outsourcing it, one of the things I'd say is it's really good and clever use of time and effective use of time to outsource tasks and outsource various things to do. But it's not possible to outsource responsibility. And ultimately, my view on this, and I'm happy to get your views on this as well, Adam, is that ultimately the responsibility of the business and the well-being of the business must rest with the business owner. So my view is that business owners, practice owners must, even if they're outsourcing the tasks to a VA or having some help with a social media company, they need to maintain an active interest in what's going on and be across what's happening. Have you found working with clients, Adam, that those who are engaged to one degree or another get varying results at all, or what's the outcome there?
Jesse, you absolutely nailed it and I probably brushed over that in that explanation where I said you can outsource up to 90% of it. That 10% is exactly that, is you maintaining an active interest in what's going on and being across what's happening, whether you're doing it through a marketing company or in-house or even using or especially if you're using VAs. A lot of your content's going to be distributed through a content engine like Hootsuite or HubSpot, anything like that, which allows you to actually be going in and looking at what content is being posted about your business before it's getting posted.
Yes.
and vetting that. So absolutely, the guys who maintain that level of interest in their own business are always going to get a better result at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, nobody knows your business like you do. Every business in a social media sense has a voice. So even though, say, we as a company might potentially do a social media strategy for two different dental practices who market in the exact same market 2 towns apart, but the voice and how those two come across will still be different.
Of course.
So it's imperative that you own that voice and what's happening about your business.
Yeah, look, thanks, mate. That's fantastic, and getting that voice right is absolutely critical. It's that whole authenticity piece as well, and there's a lot of things that we could kind of dissect out of that. But Adam, what I just want to talk about quickly is if a dentist listening to this podcast has said, right, I'm committed, I'm going to go and get a good strategy, I'm going to implement it, I'm going to get the right help, I'm going to build the team around me to support me on that, I'm going to be interested in the outcomes and be across it. What sort of results do you think that they could expect? We touched on this a bit earlier. If they get this right and they do it really well, do it elegantly, what sort of things might they expect as a consequence of that?
Well, I think that there's probably 3 key things, and there's the obvious that they'd be getting new clients.
Yep.
They'd be retaining their existing clients in a very powerful way, and in getting referrals through those clients, which again equals new clients.
Yep.
But the key thing is that if they're getting it right, then they're meeting all the objectives that are in their strategy. I keep coming back to you. Before you do anything, you must create a strategy, and that strategy is going to say these are the outcomes we're looking to achieve. So the obvious part of getting it right means that you'll achieve the outcomes that you outlined as important in your strategy.
Yeah, cool. Mate, thanks so much for that. That's fantastic. We're going to wrap up in a second because I know you've got lots of stuff on your plate in terms of supporting people with their social media strategy. But if you were thinking about 3 things listeners could do now just to get started, what would be 3 things that they could get started with right now as action steps to kind of get the ball rolling for them?
The first thing is to just do a little bit of jump on some social media now and do a little bit of research on what your competitors are doing with social media. You should be across that anyway, but it'll give you a sense of who's doing good stuff and who's not.
Yeah.
The other thing is obviously to make sure your website is really world class. At the end of the day, the high majority of what you're trying to do through your social media is bring people into your website for a number of reasons. It might be to book an appointment or to get more information or to contact you, but you're going to centralize that through your website. So take a look at your website if you haven't looked at it for a while, and again in that research, have a look at other websites and see what's good and what's not. interesting enough, I was in a meeting yesterday and we were looking at good websites, and one of the people in the meeting said, I found this awesome one, this guy named Jesse Green. I was actually laughing. So there's an example. Go and have a look at Jesse's personal website. It is world class. And the final thing I'd say is, look, jump on my website, which is adamhoulahan.com, and there's a free download on there that will help you set out your LinkedIn profile. And I guarantee you that no matter what you do in social media, and certainly as far as dentists go, this will be all around referral partners, is you really need to have a strong presence on LinkedIn.
Yeah, cool.
There's a free download there. Grab it, go for it, and it'll help you outline your profile the way it should be.
Adam, mate, that is absolute gold, and I really appreciate those tips there. Just quickly, I mentioned earlier your book, Social Media Source. I know you've got another book coming out called the LinkedIn Playbook, which is due mid-year, I think. Where can people get a copy of either of those books when they're available, mate?
Jesse, right now, the best thing, jump on the website. There's a link to both of the books, so you can grab Social Media Secret Sauce today. The LinkedIn Playbook it's almost complete. We're just putting the final touches on it now, but you can register on that same page for some cool offers and things we're going to have around the launch of that coming out in July.
Cool. I can really recommend the book, guys. I've read it from cover to cover. I use it as my go-to guide for social media, and it's a terrific read. Adam, mate, thanks so much for coming along today. It's been an absolute pleasure, as it always is, to have a conversation with you, mate. I always appreciate the insights and the perspectives that you bring to social media in particular, but to business in general. You've got a wealth of experience in all of those areas, and I really thank you for taking the time to share that with us today, and hope you enjoy the beach at the sunny Gold Coast today, mate.
Jesse, it's my pleasure to be with you guys early this morning, and it'll be an even bigger pleasure to be at that beach in a few hours' time.
Fantastic, mate. Well, have a good day, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Jesse.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessegreen.com and download the free report.